Hey guys, welcome back to Magic TV. My name's Craig. It's 9 o'clock. It's time for another interview. And today I'm interviewing somebody who is a personal hero of mine. This is somebody who has literally made a name for himself as one of the most creative performers in almost any genre you can imagine. I am so excited. The creations that this person has put together over the years are in my act, and I can't say that about many people. He's a performer, a creator, an inventor, a lecturer, and an incredibly nice person as well. I am, of course, talking about the one and only Keith Fields. How you doing, Keith?
I'm doing great. That was the most amazing complimentary interview I've ever had. And I just feel sorry for all the people listening to this going, him? Really?
It's true. Honestly, you're responsible for probably about 50% of my act. Like,
can I just apologize to everybody in that case?
Yeah, it's your fault. But I've been wanting to interview you for a while because
I know I've been waiting here for that call, and I thought you weren't going to interview me.
I was building up. I was building up to it. You know? I was making sure I had, I had my whole interviewing game down before I came to you. I wanted to make sure I was on form.
Cool. We'll go with that.
One of the reasons I wanted to interview you is because you literally do span so many different genres. You do so many different types of, I don't even want to say magic, because a lot of what you do is entertainment first. And I think that's the most important thing about
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I want to get your thoughts on that. But for the odd one or two people that are watching this that don't know who Keith Fields is, and I can't imagine that there's many, can we start off with talking about your origin story?
Of course.
And how you kind of found your way into magic and kind of how that all came to be. Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. And my origin story is not the classic magic set origin story that we hear, but I did, when I was about 12 or 13, have a magic book. And it had some incredible magic in it that I now know is incredible magic, but I didn't understand it at the time. And that's always fascinated me. We try to teach kids magic. I think I must have been about, I don't know, 7 or 8 when I got this book, and it had some crazy stuff in it. I mean, it had the old, the disappearing digit thing in it, and I had no idea how good that was until I saw someone show it to someone else. And I remembered it from that book. So I had that book. That was my first introduction. And I loved watching magic on the television. I was very proud when I was about 12 or 13, when I finally worked out that the guy on TV that was sticking a red silk in his hand and made the red silk disappear and then opened his hand, I worked out that he must have had surgically an invisible pocket on his hand. That's the only possible way it could have been done. So I worked out. So I was very pleased with myself on solving that puzzle. But my magic career didn't actually start until I was 19, when I met a guy. His name was Joff. I have no idea where he is now or what he's doing now. And he showed me the Professor's Nightmare. And I was bitten, and I was bitten big time, and, blown away by that trick. And that was the moment. And I can remember it clearly. I can remember the amazement I felt clearly from this day. And more than anything else, I can remember the fact that I kept me up all night trying to work out how the damn trick was done. And at about 4 o'clock in the morning, I finally worked it out. And I was just elated, and I went to see him the next day, finally worked it out, but I hadn't in my mind remembered the second bit, the count.
Yes.
I'd forgotten about that. All my concentration was on how he managed to change the ropes. I worked that out, and then he did it again, and he did it with the count, and the bugger fooled me again. And I was like back to square one. So, all the work I put in, but, he was a very nice guy, and he gave me some tips. He didn't teach me anything. He just said, how on earth do you learn this stuff? He showed me a couple of other tricks as well, but that's the only one I really remember. I said, how do you learn this stuff? And he says, books. And he said, oh, there are a couple of magic companies. There's one called Supreme Magic in Devon. And he said, I can't remember if he gave me the address, but he said, go to the local library, go to a bookshop, and there'll probably be books on magic. Some of them are better than others, but you just learn it from books. The next day, I met Henry Hay.
Oh, wow.
and his Amateur Magician's Handbook. I didn't meet him, the man.
Oh, well, I was about to say that's impressive.
I just met the book. I just met the book, but that was so that was my first magic book. And I don't know if you've ever tried to learn anything from Henry Hayes' Amateur Magician's Handbook, but you know, you'll find something like the invisible pass in 4 photographs and 1 paragraph. Mm-hmm. But I went through that book from beginning to end. I learned every single sleight in the book, all the coin work. I made half the props that were in there from scratch and cardboard and stuff like that. And I was just totally bitten by the bug. And that was it, really. I was a long time before I actually started performing, though. I was just an absolutely fascinated amateur. I don't consider myself a natural performer. It's not, you know, I can't look back on my life and say all I wanted to do was perform. I never had that experience at all. I'm shy. I'm a quiet person. So I go to the local magic club, which at times the Sussex Magic Circle in Lewes. And there was a guy called Stan Reynolds down there who was very influential, lovely guy. I used to ride a Honda 90, you know, remember those little moped-like things. That's the only transport I had when I was 19. I rode a Honda 90 from Crawley to Burgess Hill, and then he'd give me a lift from Burgess Hill to Lewes. And then we come back to his house, and he was a late bird as well, so we'd stay up until about 1 o'clock in the morning, and he'd be showing me tricks. And then I'd have to get back home on my Honda 90, the extra 15 miles. Whatever it was, back to Crawley. So that was my only magic input back then. Yeah, a few other old guys who no one would remember. Stanley Watson, do you remember him?
Yes.
Stanley Watson, you know, the man with the scissors, you know, who did a fabulous act. Actually, he did a marvelous. He had a floating orb, a zombie routine. But he used to do. There are bits of on YouTube of him. There's a couple of bits where he obviously did a film and was in a film. But yeah, he was a fantastic kids entertainer, believe it or not. Mad, high energy kids entertainer, sort of in the, you know, the Terry Seabrook energy sort of vein, you know, really high energy, no messing around. It was all fun. It was big shouting matches and all this kind of thing. So he was probably my role model for children's entertaining. And and I went and bought some props, including a Run Rabbit Run and a couple of other things. And I was playing with them. And a friend of mine who had a daughter and was also interested in ventriloquism said, "Will you do the birthday party for them?" And I said, "Absolutely." So he said, "I'll do some ventriloquism and you can do some magic." So I did my little magic show, and absolutely, you know, it was just brilliant. Everything worked, and I just discovered this amazing skill that I didn't know I had. And he went out and tried to do ventriloquism and couldn't get any control over the kids at all. It was absolutely chaos. And, you know, it literally was the old thing. Someone else came up and said, "Can you do my kids' party? Can you do my kids' party?" And I was sort of probably about 21, 22 at the time. And all of a sudden I was earning extra money at the weekends, you know, busy working as a computer programmer at the time, but that was all sort of pre-professional. But that was my absolute origin story. I hope that wasn't too long and boring.
Oh, that's super interesting. So yeah. It was always, like, maybe not computer programming, but it was always getting a proper job that was going to be like the main thing.
Even at that point, I wasn't even considering magic as a career. It wasn't, you know, it's not in a million years. Don't be silly. You know, I had to work, and you know, it just didn't even cross my mind, not even as a possibility.
So you're a computer programmer. You're doing kids shows. You're making extra money on the weekends.
Yeah.
You're going to magic clubs. You're learning magic. You're enjoying magic.
Yeah.
How did you get from that to being a full-time pro and literally traveling the world? I mean, because you said you're not a natural performer, and that was not really part of the game plan. But something
a story I very rarely tell, because I don't publish my personal life a lot. But actually, I have the fact that my first wife left me. I owe my career to that fact, really, because I ended up I was living in London by then, and we had a breakup. I had a young child, and we had a breakup, and I just couldn't cope with going to work. And as it happened, the place I was living with, I just needed to find somewhere to move out and move into. And I ended up moving into just a flat over a shop with a guy who I'm sure you know of, Steve Rawlings, the juggler.
Yes.
Yes. So they just rented a house and they had a spare room. I was looking for somewhere, and we had a mutual friend, and I just moved in because I had to get. It was like, didn't have time to think about it. First thing available, boom, and that's what happened. Got usual in that situation. You get quite depressed. I couldn't be bothered to go to work, so I handed him a resignation. And Steve said, "Well, you can do some magic. Why don't you come and do a street show?" He'd just started sort of a bit before. And I went and did a street show. And funny enough, the same thing happened as it did with kid shows. I seemed to manage to grasp the basic essentials to be good enough reasonably quickly, if that makes sense. I think in that sort of a job, you have to get to a standard when you are getting some reward for what you're doing. And in that case, it was getting crowds and making money.
Yeah.
So I gave up my job. I gave up being on. I was on the dole at the time. The only time in my life I've ever been on the dole, and I was on the dole for about 3 weeks or something. I gave up that, and 6 months later, I bought a house, and I put on my career. Listen, what do you do for a living? I put street entertainer.
Wow.
That was 1980. Oh goodness me, when was this? 1984, probably something like that. I'm talking about, yeah. So things happen. I mean, I don't know how it happened, but the street was kind of. I was still doing kid shows at the time, and I was jumping between doing street shows in Covent Garden and kid shows. And again, that was the next step. I mean, being a street entertainer is probably the best way of learning this business, because you get the chance to do as many shows as you want to do. And it doesn't you don't have to be doing big shows all the time. It doesn't matter, because you can learn just as much from a small sidewalk street show as you can from a big circle show, if it's about developing material and growing and learning techniques and all that kind of thing. And if you do enough shows, you are forced to learn new techniques. And many things that I learned at the time, or I look back on that I should have learned at the time, but then, as in always developing new material. At that time, it was very much about developing your act, and when you've got your act, that was what you did for the next 20 years. I don't know. And now I'm totally different on that and doing all different stuff all the time. But don't want to jump forward too far on this roller coaster ride of fun that we're having.
Well, before we jump forward, did you find it difficult transitioning from kid shows to a street theatre? Because it is a very different skill set, isn't it? Performing to a few kids at a party and performing to a complete eclectic range of adults.
I think learning quickly from your audience is one of the skills you need if you want to progress in this business. You really have to learn to read the feedback that the audience are giving you. And there have been times when I have been reading it, and there have been times when I've been stuck in a rut. My career's been, it's been up and down and up and down and up. It hasn't been one of those by any means. I've taken a long time getting to where I am, but very happy that I finally got here. I've lost my thread. What was the question?
It's just transitioning from kid shows.
Oh, transitioning. That was it. Yeah. I think my children's character, who I was known as the amazing Mr. Whiz, master of madness, magic, and mime. And I couldn't use the name Mr. Whiz when I moved to America, because Whiz has a different meaning over here. In fact, someone did turn around to me once, an American friend, and she vaguely remembered that story and said, didn't you have a weird name as a children's entertainer, like Mr. Piss or something? She got the wrong connection, but that happens. My character as a children's entertainer was a high energy, a lot of movement. I kind of never stopped talking when I did it, and I just took that style onto the street. And all I was doing was I was speaking to adults instead of children. But I think when I talk to children, I talk to them like adults. So I wasn't treating the children like children when I was doing a children's show. I was treating the children like my gang, and we were all messing around together. And I kind of just took that onto the street with me. And I think that was probably the style of the street at the time. I was obviously very heavily influenced by Paul Daniels, because he was the only, in the 1980s, he was the only comedy magician he saw. So I learned the chop cup. I mean, you know, who wouldn't? What a fantastic trick it is. And I'm still doing it to this day. I was performing it in a theatre just last week. Now, obviously, incredibly different from what I was doing then, and even more, you know, more different than what it was when Paul Daniels did it. But yeah, so my stock in trade when I was a street entertainer was the chop cup, cigarette in jacket. I did a bill in banana routine, where the bill actually never ended up in the banana, but the comedy of the routine was in peeling the banana and someone was biting bits off the banana to try and find. And it was one of those moments then, you know, some people just shoved the banana in their face, some people shoved it in my face, all sorts of crazy things happened. I remember I did one. I remember one street show. I was vanishing the. I was doing with a £50 note. I was vanishing the £50 note in a devil's hang. And the audience laughed. Something happened. I didn't know what had happened. But what I'd done is I'd switched his bill and I put another bill. I had 50s, 20s, 10s all lined up so I could switch a bill for bill. And I put my bill in the devil's hanky and I loaded his bill in a salt shaker. So the final production was he was shaking the magic salt cellar on his $50 bill. I told him to put the salt shaker in his pocket, then vanished the £50 note. And of course, at the end of the routine, it was in the salt shaker, which was in his pocket all along. Great fun routine, worked really well on the street. So in this routine, I heard a laugh. I went to vanish the silk, vanish the bill, and I felt inside something heavy. And I thought that was weird. And I felt down I took the devil's hang and felt down, and in the bottom, no bill, just a coin. And then I realized what the laugh was. The laugh was when I was messing around with someone in the audience, he reached into the devil's hank and purely by chance reached into the right part of the devil's hank, took the £50 note out. I know this because people told me afterwards, put it in his pocket, held up a 10p coin and dropped that in the silk instead. Now, that was all fine. That was all fine. But at the end of the routine, we opened up the salt shaker and I was looking in the thing and I'm going, you've got my other dollar bill, £50 note. Sorry, I'm getting my currencies exchanged because I live over in Detroit now. You've got my £50 note in your pocket. And I don't want to give you this £50 note. Otherwise, this show has just cost me £50 to do because he would make you £50. So I did the whole thing, unwrapped it, and I said, is that your signature on there? And I said, yes. And I took my hat off, I put it in my mouth and said, thank you very much. Give him a big round of applause. And he just walked off. Now, I don't know what he thought. I don't know what he thought. I have this little thing in my mind that his wife was with him in the audience. And they walked off and she was going, you just gave a bloody street entertainer £50, you idiot. Why the heck did you do that? Because that's what the audience thought had happened. And then he gets home and he reaches into his pocket and he finds a £50 note in his pocket. So there's all sorts of dreams that could have happened. I wonder if someone else is telling that story from the other side. It's one of those bizarre happenings on the streets. But I would always just go with what happened. And I still do. And I think I learned that from kids shows, because in kids shows, you just have to go with what happens and make the best of it. And because I was very interactive in the kids shows and I'd actually talk to the kids and converse with the kids and I didn't mind where it went because I knew I could always pull it back to the trick. And I think that's what I do. I took that skill, which I developed in kids shows, onto the streets. And then after that into comedy clubs and it all worked. It just worked. That's all I can say, really.
Fantastic.
That seems like another long answer to a very simple question.
I'm literally loving every second of this. I really, really am. And you just mentioned comedy clubs there. So was that the next thing for you? Was it? It was. And why did you did you do that? At this point, you're full time, but you're full time.
Yeah, I'm full time. I've been probably doing a mixture of street shows and children's parties for about probably 2 to 3 years professionally. My son was born in 19. So we're talking about 90. We are talking about 1984 here, which I kind of think of 1984 as the real start of my career, because up until that point I was kind of just playing. It was like when I gave up my job and started doing street shows, the expectation in my mind was, well, I might as well, I've got nothing else to do at the moment, and probably in 3 months' time I'll get my shit together and I'll go and get a job again.
Yeah.
and basically still waiting for that to happen, I suppose. Crazy as it is.
Yeah.
But the comedy clubs thing, I did one comedy club. I don't know how far you go back in comedy clubs. Did you ever come across a place called the Tunnel Club? Or
No, I don't remember the Tunnel Club. No.
Have you heard of Malcolm Hardy
Yes.
up the creek
Yes.
in Greenwich? Prior to Up the Creek, there was a very early comedy club, and again, back in the mid-80s here, called the Tunnel Club, and it was kind of like where the good acts go to die, and it's very famous for the open spots. They used to do open spots after the interval, and the audience would be chanting, "Bring on the Christians," and Malcolm Hardy would go out and say, "Okay, at least let them try before you boo them off," and it was kind of sport. That's what, hence the "Bring on the Christians" line. But when you've got 150, 200 people in the dingiest pub in Greenwich chanting "Bring on the Christians" to open the second half of the show,
Yeah.
it was crazy. It was one, but I was working with Harry Enfield and the guys from The Young Ones, and loads and loads of people who went on to be big stars then. So that's where techniques are very, very important, because I think you can learn just as much from watching another performer who's doing a good job and saying, why is what he is doing working? And that's something I've always studied other people, and I've always asked the question, if I was doing something like that, how would I do it differently?
Yeah.
And I always, if a comedian's on stage and he does a setup line, I'm always thinking, what would my punchline be to that setup? And it sort of kept that sort of continual thinking. And I think I've learned one of the things in comedy, it doesn't matter what you say, as long as it kind of makes sense. And it's not what everyone else expected you to say at that moment.
Mm.
That's a plus. That's a comedy plus. It's not necessarily funny, but because it's unexpected, you get another bite of the apple, and you can get another line in. So going off at tangents is always a great thing. You never, when you go off at a tangent, you never know where you're going to end up. You just hope it's funny at the end.
And why did you do comedy clubs? Was it because?
Oh, that was John Lenihan's fault.
Was it?
John,
Oh,
John Lenihan, one of my great mates as well. I was working on the street with him, and in fact, I think I was one of the first people I got to meet when he came to the UK, because we actually met in Eastbourne at the Magic Convention, which I'm going to in about 2 weeks' time, a month's time, whatever it is. So yeah, he just started working comedy clubs, and he said to me, "You're funny. You should work comedy clubs. They're great fun." And I said, "What's a comedy club?" Because I didn't really knew that. I knew about the Tunnel Club, but I didn't know they were all over the place. I just thought that was a one-off thing. And he said, "Buy a copy of Time Out, and they're all listed in there. Just phone them up and tell them you want to come and do an open spot." Fine, that's what you do. I bought a copy of Time Out. I opened it up and I looked through at the listings, and I went, "Oh, look, there's one in." "Oh, I'm in Covent Garden. That's only about half a mile away. There's one in Leicester Square. It's called the Comedy Store. I'll give him a ring." So I went home that night, gave him a ring, and he said, Kim Kinney was the guy who was in charge back in those days. And he said, "Yeah, we've got a gap for an open spot tomorrow night. As it happens, someone's just pulled out." And I said, "Well, that's all right. I'm working in the garden. I'll be there." He said, "Okay, fantastic." So this was actually just before Christmas of 1984, I think. And he said, no, sorry, 1985. Round about the time anyway. So I went, he asked me what I could do and said, "Yeah, do 10 minutes, whatever." And I thought, brilliant, I could do my chop cup and cigarette and jacket, and that'd be 10 minutes. That's absolutely fine. The first thing I realized, and I learned this instantly, is, how street entertainers start. What's the first thing we do? We pull a crowd.
Yeah.
And I walked on stage and I thought, my street act up to that point, up to the point where from when I started to when I did the cigarette and jacket, was about 10 minutes. So I suddenly realized that half of that 10 minutes, no, sorry, up to the end of the chop cup, the cigarette and jacket was a later thing. I was going to just go on and do the chop cup because that was 10 minutes, had a strong ending. And I walked on, I stood on the stage, took my bag, put it down, looked up, and I thought, crap, the first 5 minutes of my act is pulling that initial edge. It was quite easy to get a crowd in those days in Covent Garden because street entertaining was quite new, and it was, not everyone had seen it like they have today. So it was quite easy to get a crowd, but it still took 5 minutes, 10 minutes to get the edge. And I suddenly realized the crowd were already there. So all that stuff I did at the beginning of the act was suddenly irrelevant. I have seen other street entertainers not learn that many years, and they go on, and all the stuff they do in the opening 5 minutes is about pulling a crowd. Bizarre to me. So that's why I ended up doing the chop cup and the cigarette and jacket rather than just the chop cup, which was actually a good thing, because the cigarette and jacket was a great routine, great reactions and everything else, largely Terry Seabrook, needless to say. And afterwards, I didn't know what to do or what was happening. And Kim Kinney came up to me, and he had his book open, and he said, "What are you doing next Sunday?" He said, "Can you do 20 minutes?" And I went, "Yeah." And he said, "What are you doing next Sunday night?" Which was the Sunday between Christmas and New Year. And I said, "Nothing." "Why?" And he said, "Good, you're in."
That's
that
great.
that was it. So I walked into it, and it was just like, it just happened. And I'd done, I don't know how many shows I did there over the years. My picture was on the wall for many years, and I don't know if they've redecorated recently, but even after they moved, my picture was still on the wall down there after they moved, which is quite funny. I'm wearing because I used to do some mime stuff as well, white gloves and stuff. So I'm wearing a really silly waistcoat, and it looks very, one of those. Very bad shot, but at the time I thought it was brilliant. And then I went, a couple of weeks after that, someone said, "You should go to Jongleurs." So I phoned up and I got an open spot at Jongleurs. And when I did the open spot at Jongleurs, Maria came up to me and they said, "I've been speaking to the other guys and they say you've done 2 or 3 other comedy clubs." And I said, "Well, I've worked at the Comedy Store a couple of times." And she said, "Good, can you do 20 minutes? One of the acts hasn't turned up." And I said, "Is this, do you want me to do a 20-minute open spot?" She said, "No." She said, "No, if you do, okay, I'll pay you." And she paid me, and I was working there for the next 20 odd years as well. So doors just opened. And I often say I've spent my whole life going through open doors. And I think maybe some people never go through a door because they're not prepared to take a risk. There's lots of things I haven't done in my life, which maybe I should have done. But, at that point, I was happy to take a risk and do anything.
That's, if there's a lesson to be learned from where we are right now, it's, you can't expect things to happen. You've got to go and make it happen. You got to open doors, walk through. That's what you've done. That's amazing. That's incredible.
I remember going to hear a motivational speaker guy once, and his whole thing was, "It's your fault. No one's going to do it for you." One of my silly lines is, "Wake up and smell the carbon monoxide." You've got to do it for yourself, basically. And at times that's hard. At times it's hard, but no one's going to do it for you.
But it's very easy, in this industry to blame other things. "Oh, it wasn't me; it was a bad audience. Oh, yeah. I didn't get lucky." You make your own luck, and that's something that I'm seeing from everything you're telling me.
I remember I did lots of other things at the time. I remember I was in with a sort of mainstream as well as I was doing alternative comedy, and I remember doing a mainstream gig with a couple of old mainstream comics, and I was like mid-20s or something, and these guys were probably well into their 50s. One of them had been a regular on The Comedians, the TV show.
Yeah, I remember Comedians.
And he was the sort of star of the show. I think the other comic was the MC, and I was probably doing half hour or something like that. And they were sitting around moaning, going, "Oh, I wouldn't want to be getting into this business nowadays. It's not as good as it was," and all that kind of thing. And I was the young kid going, "What do you mean? There's so many opportunities out there. I can't believe you can't see them." And this story comes full circle because I was in a magic convention a couple of years ago. It was BC, before COVID, so it's probably 3 or 4 years ago. And I was sitting around with a couple of the older magicians, and they were going, "Oh, it must be terrible getting into this business now. It's so hard. There's no work. There's no this." And they were and it was exactly the same story as I heard from these old guys then. And I think this is just old guys moaning. Every generation has its opportunities.
Yeah.
There are new opportunities. It's just that you want to do what you've done for the last 10 years. You don't want to try anything new. You don't want to put yourself out there, and I think that's probably one of the secrets of success of anything is you've got to keep reinventing yourself. And there's a time when I clearly wasn't doing that, and my career and my life suffered for it. But you do have to keep reinventing yourself and doing new stuff and putting yourself out there.
That's really good advice. So what was the next kind of part of your career? Because did you carry? I know a lot of guys that started doing street theatre and street shows, and when something else came along off the back of that, they stopped doing it. Like, you know, you still had your kid shows. You were now doing comedy clubs. You're in demand by jugglers.
I think the direction that I ended up going in at that point was the something had to give, because I was doing too much, and it was the kid shows. Because I'd be, you know, going out doing a couple of kid shows in the afternoon and going out and doing 3 comedy clubs in the evening. You know, so the kid shows were the things that had to give. But I've always been a great believer, I mean, professionally speaking, of multi-streaming your income sources. And I'd never wanted to throw everything in, you know, in one. The more, if one stream dries up, another stream comes. And I did all sorts of wacky and crazy things back then. For a couple of years, me and a group of street entertainers worked with a guy who ran traction engine fairs all over the Midlands and the north of England. And we put on a circus show called Circus PAF. PAF stood for Pistas Farts, because that's the state we were in when we came up with the idea. And that we did that for about 2 or 3 years, and that filled up like every weekend through the summer, a different place. And I had a camper van, and we did that, so that was a lot of fun. We were talking sub trunks earlier before we started doing this. I did a sub trunk in that routine with Steve Mills, a mate of mine. So we did that for a couple of years. That was a lot of fun. I worked for there was a company in Crawley in Sussex called Radio Mercury, a local radio station. And they were doing lots of road shows at the time. So I used to go out and do their road shows. I was their roadshow magician. And again, it was like South of England show or different events that we'd go to. And they took a big caravan and they played games, because that's all the DJs could do. And then when the crowd had gone, weren't interested in their games, they put me on to do another show. And I did a show, pulled a crowd and said, now welcome the people you want to see, the DJs. The DJs come out and start playing silly pop games with them. When they lost the crowd, I'd go out again, and so it went on. And I did that for about probably 3 or 4 years, 3 or 4 seasons, until they basically stopped doing those kind of promotions. But yeah, I got into TV warm-ups. Again, crazily by accident, it just happened. It was when Sky Television, gosh, I forgot, I haven't even thought about this for ages. Do you remember Derek Jameson?
Yes.
When Sky TV first came out, he did a live chat stroke newsy type of current affairsy type of program, where they had sort of politicians and you know, stars that were trying to launch something, and it was filmed at 6 o'clock every night, 4 nights a week in the what used to be the Windmill Theatre in Soho. That place has got a lot of history to it. You know, that was a place where a lot of old magicians used to work there, and it was a strip club, and there were girls dancing there and magicians between the acts. Long stories about that place. But that was now a TV studio for the Derek Jameson show. Shane Ritchie was his co-host. Wow. And I somehow got the job, as I was a guest on the show. And they liked me as a guest on the show, and they got me the warm-up act, and I was doing that I did that for ages, probably a couple of years, unless I had to sub it out to someone. I was doing 4 nights a week. Most of the comedy clubs on a Thursday were in London that I was working anyway, so I'd finish there at 6:15 and go on and do a comedy club if I had a gig. But those 4 nights were giving me a living. You know, I didn't need the comedy clubs at the time, because I had the 4 nights of warm-up work. And that went away, and I ended up getting warm-up work on Ready Steady Cook somehow. Again, I can't remember how, but there was 2 of us for a while. The other guy dropped out, and I got taken on, and I think I must have done that. That was in probably the mid-90s. And yeah, I must have done that for 2 or 3 years. So I've been very blessed to fall on my feet and get some of these crazy jobs, which lasted for a long time. And that gives you a heck of a lot of security.
You're talking about such an eclectic range of jobs that you've done in this
Yeah.
industry. You know, I speak to most people. I've interviewed hundreds of people, and they go, "Yeah, I work restaurants, or I work, I worked working men's clubs, or yeah, I got straight into corporates or weddings." Very few people I speak to go, "Well, I did this and this and that." Was that by design, or was it just
No, I
like
don't.
keeping an eye
I've
out?
had more design in my career in the last 10 years than I ever had before. Here's the honest truth. I always thought of myself as as a craftsman rather than an artist.
Mm.
And I look at it in terms of, I'm not talking the difference if you talk about a painter painting a house as opposed to, painting the Mona Lisa. I'm talking about, I did a good job. I did a good job, but I never thought I was great. Never had that sort of confidence. I never thought I was a real artist. And it was only when I moved to America and I went through this, which we'll come on to a bit more later, but it was only in that experience that I really considered myself, actually, I can be proud of who I am. I can be proud of what I've done. Oh dear, sorry. Go away. Oh no, he didn't even dance for it. He just went quiet. I forgot to stop. But I can't. That was probably someone listening in going, "You mind? You're sounding big-headed now." But I've reached that point where now I look back and I'm much more comfortable calling myself an artist, and I feel that's a title which I have the right to now.
But the other thing that I'm picking up from all of this as well is that you weren't solely married to magic performance, like the comedy clubs. Although you did magic, there was an element of comedy there. And later on, we'll talk about some of your iconic routines that don't involve magic at all. Was that an important part to you? Were you looking at yourself as an entertainer first and foremost, and magic was a vehicle to entertain people, or were you looking at yourself as a magician?
I entertainer first, absolutely. My archetypal heroes in the world of comedy and magic are probably not the same as a lot of people's. For me, it was Bruce Forsyth and Tommy Cooper. They were my two absolute heroes. I was doing a warm up for the Frost program as well. David Frost had a Thursday night regular program, chat show, and he had all sorts of guests on. Some of them very serious, and it was very interesting doing a sort of warm up as a comedy man when you knew the subject was going to be, starving people in someone or something like this. So it was a very interesting moment. But Bruce Forsyth was a guest on the show, and then me doing the warm up, and I know he's coming on the show, and I was sort of desperately wanted to meet him. The floor manager came up to take me off, and they were just about to get started on the show, so they were going, right. And I walked through the curtains and I went spank into Bruce Forsyth and almost knocked him over. The first time I met him, he was about to go on the show, and he fell backwards. There was the curtain and the wall a bit behind him, and he was sort of looking through the curtain. He was watching me through the curtain, and he said, and he was about to go on the show. He said, "I was watching you through the curtain. You're really funny." And I thought, bloody hell, that's coming from Bruce Forsyth. I was just an amazing moment, and I never met him after the show or anything. That was the only time I ever got to meet the guy. But yeah, he was very much a guy that would put his hand to anything. Yeah. And I think Tommy Cooper was the same. He'd just do something crazy because it was crazy, and getting more and more courage to do crazier and crazier things. Just been how my life's been.
That's amazing. So you're doing warm-up acts for TV shows. You're working comedy clubs all over London. You're very, very busy.
Yeah.
How did you get from there to you moving over to America? What happened? What happened in that? Because it's safe to say at this point you've got a great career. There's a lot of work. You're not worried about getting gigs or anything like that.
Not at all. Not at all. And I'll throw in one extra story, which is probably something that not many people know about. At the time, I was working with Maria, who was the owner of Jongleurs, and I was also working with another guy who's a TV producer on a TV sitcom idea. And we were working on it and developing it, and he had a meeting where he was pitching. Jongleurs had put together a company to get all the comics together to write TV ideas and pitch TV ideas, and mine was one of them. We were working on it, but mine was considered not ready yet. We were still developing it. They went to this pitch meeting, bang, 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 bang. Yeah, anything else? Yeah, anything else? Went through the whole thing. And they went, okay, thanks very much. Have you got anything else? And the one thing at the bottom of the pile was my idea. And he picked up, well, there's this one. And that was the one they bit on. That was the one that got picked up. And at this stage, I mean, it's a long progress getting from pitching an idea, and there's many fences you have to go through. A few more meetings were had, and this was in the time of The Office, and consequently, the idea of a mockumentary was kind of a new idea that was sort of just making headway, and everyone wanted a show like that. And this wasn't what I wanted originally, but hey, if a TV company wants it, we're going to say yes. We're not stupid. And they said, would it be possible to do this as a sort of Office-style mockumentary type of program? You know, there've been loads of them since. And we said, oh, absolutely. We hadn't thought about that. What a brilliant idea, Mr. Man who's got all the money to spend, you know. So we went away and we sort of rewrote the concept to fit his brief, and he liked it. And he looked up to me and he said, that's fantastic. How long is it going to take you to get a script for a pilot episode ready? Now, I'd never written a sitcom in my life. I hadn't written anything since school, really. But, you know, I don't do that kind of thing. I'm not a writer. So I kind of looked up, and the producer was the other side, and he sort of went like this. And I'm going, that's a lot of help, but does it mean 3 weeks or 3 months? I had no idea. So I went for months because I thought years was too much. And I said, well, I got quite a lot on, but, you know, probably maybe 3 months or so. And he sort of smiled, and we got away with it. So we wrote the script, we got through that stage, various meetings, other writers come on board. The last meeting I had with that TV producer, the last words out of his mouth to me were, leave it with me, I'll get the money together and a studio so we can make a pilot. Last words I heard from him. And he was with, I think it was Carlton was the company. 3 weeks later, Carlton were taken over by Granada. And when something like that happens, there's a big job shuffle. And the next meeting wasn't with me, but with the other guy I was working with, the producer I was working with. And the big man at TV said to him, I still want to make this program, but that's not my job anymore. That was it. So, you know, it hit the dirt. And I think that is the thing that started a bit of a negative, a bit of a darker period in my life when, you know, that was a real knock. Probably various other things, midlife crisis, you know, various different things going on, and I suddenly got very stale. Looking back, I know some things that I was doing that were really career-wise, they were really bad, but it was a dark time. I'm sure I wasn't a particularly nice guy to live with, and you know, it was tough. I think I had meningitis about that time as well, which screwed with me a lot as well. So just went through one of those rocky times. And I got to a point when I was around about my 50th birthday where I knew I needed to do something. I knew I needed to, and I didn't know what I needed to do. Our eldest son was getting married, and my brother came over. My brother lived in America. He came over and he said, why don't you move to America? And I went, well, it's not that easy. You know, you can't just move to America. And as luck would have it, he lived in America. We only saw him once every 2 or 3 years, but we were always very close. But as luck would have it, a friend of his died. No, let me rephrase that. A friend of his died a couple of weeks later, and it was kind of lucky for me because he came back to go to the funeral, which meant we saw each other twice in close succession. So that conversation carried on. Without that moment, that happening, that conversation may not have carried on. And we got to the end of that conversation, and he said, the only way you can find out if you can get into America is to go and see a visa lawyer. Sarah, my wonderful wife, said, why wouldn't America want us? Because she's a very positive person. And, I went and did the research, and I went, no, there's no chance. I've looked at all the websites, you can't get a visa to get into America. But no, she said, yeah, well, we've got to go and see a visa lawyer. And unfortunately, she was right once before. And she decided that she had to use this, and this was going to be another time. I mean, it was a big thing. When I say she was right once before, there was a big thing we were talking about. We were buying a house, and I said, we're never going to get this mortgage. And she said, yes, we are going to get this mortgage. We'll keep trying. And we got the mortgage. So that came up, we went to see the visa lawyer, and the visa lawyer said, yeah, there's a special visa for entertainers called an O1 visa for aliens with extraordinary ability. That's the official name of the visa. And she looked through, we went through all the stuff and all the stuff I had, and she said she was 90% certain she could get us an O1 visa. She said, you're probably 50-50 if you wanted to go for a green card now. But if you actually use the O1 visa and you establish yourself and things are going well in 2 or 3 years' time, then the green card should be an easy fix. And then whatever you want to do after that. And we didn't know what to do with that information. We went to a coffee shop just around the corner from the office, and we sat there, and the decision was made on this argument. We couldn't bear to look back on that moment in 10 years' time and say, we could have moved to America. To have that in our past and say, what we felt we would have been forever saying, what would have happened if?
Yeah.
If I'd have had the guts to do that, what would that really mean? Now, we were very, very careful about, I mean, we didn't say, screw you, England, we're going to America. We left every door open that we possibly could. We didn't sell our house, we just rented it out. But it was still a huge step into the dark. It was made huger because when we actually started looking into it, it was the summer of 2008. Oh, those lazy, hazy days. It was $2.20 to the pound. It was wonderful times. So, we were okay. We had a nice house in London, so we'd done all right so far. And we figured we could rent out our house in London and we'd be able to get by for quite a period of time because the exchange rate was so strong. Yeah. What I didn't expect was 2009.
Well, yeah.
Between 2008 and 2009, the pound dropped from 220 to about 130. It's still there now. But all that, all that crap. But we at this point we'd already started over. We were always at this point on the roller coaster. Now we were just going over the top, and it was kind of too late to get off. And so we pulled the plug, and it was February 2nd, 2009. We woke up in the morning and we looked out the window, and there was about 8 inches of snow on the ground. And we thought, this is God telling us you can't leave the country today. A friend of ours drove us to the airport, and lights at the airport, listening to the radio, Gatwick Airport is closed, no flights from Gatwick. Manchester Airport is closed, no flights from Manchester. Luton Airport is closed, no flights from. We're listening, going, do we turn round? Do we do? All the buses are closed. There's no buses running. There's no trains running because the train drivers can't get to work. And we're driving to the airport to start a new life in Detroit. We get to the airport, and I say to the person that's taking, you better wait because I'm sure we'll be out in 5 minutes. Get to the airport and said, are you, is the plane empty? There's no one there. No one in the airport. There's someone behind the counter, and I'm going, is there any chance that the plane's actually going to leave today? And she said, oh, yeah. What, really? Okay, fine. We got on the plane. We sat on the plane for about 3 hours. They de-iced it twice. They cleared the runway twice. We eventually took off, and we got rerouted to Minneapolis instead of Detroit. Go through all that. We get to Detroit. This is 2009. Remember the car industry crashing and everything else. So the stories about Detroit at the time were horrible. So we get to Minneapolis, and I have to go through customs with all this new big piles of paperwork, because they have visas and everything else, and they have to do it all right. And he gets to the end of all the paperwork, stamping all these forms, and he says, "So where are you going to be living then?" And I said, "Oh, we're moving to Detroit." And he just looked at me like that, and he said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, my brother lives there." And he said, "Trust me, sir, you need a better reason to move to Detroit than that." And then he gave me my passport back and said, "Welcome to America." But yeah, so we moved into Detroit and got settled down and started a new life.
But you went to, from listening to you, you moved to Detroit with not really a plan. Like,
No.
obviously, you left doors open in the UK in case things failed, and you had your house over there, and obviously your brother lived in Detroit. But in terms of an income, it was just like, well, we've got these special skills. Let's go and see how that works out for us.
The only work I had at the time, I had a bit of cruise work at the time, and that I had some cruises lined up, and I could probably get one cruise a month. I was running at with a particular company, which was going quite well. But I'd been in America maybe 2 months, and that I got sacked from that cruise line, which happens a lot in the cruise industry. You have a couple of bad audiences, and I'm not saying bad shows, because there is such a thing as a bad audience, and you have a couple of bad shows, and that particular line is very much everything is based on your score, on your points. They say very clearly, and they said that when you get on the ship, they said the audience decide whether you're coming back or not. It's up to them. So don't take it the hard way. That's how we run our business. So fine. I had a great show, so I thought, but I just didn't score enough, so they didn't keep me. And even the cruise director said, "I can't believe the points, but I'm sorry, but this is the way it works." And she was going, "It's stupid," but it happened. But that was my only last remaining bit of work that then dried up. And I thought, what am I going to do? And I thought, well, what did I do when I first started? I was a street entertainer. So I started doing some research, and I found some places around here I can work in the street. And I went out and started because I had to do something. I had to do something. And it's been a process from there, but I'm not quite sure how we got from there to here. But I mean, things started. We started marketing, we started getting to know, and I got into some local comedy clubs in America and worked some comedy clubs. Whole different system over here, very, very different system. But Mark Ridley runs the big comedy club in Detroit, and he's quite well known in the industry. As soon as I got to headline there, which in America means you're doing an hour show in a comedy club, it's a different setup. But as soon as I got to headline there, that opened the door to perform at all the small comedy clubs around, because I'd headlined the biggest one, so it was a shoe-in. And that happened. Oh, and one of the other great things that happened, wonderful man, Trevor Lively. Do you know Trevor Lively? He's retired now. He was a trade show worker, and he used to book me probably, once every 6 months, if there was a trade show that he couldn't do, or that he had 2 jobs going at, he'd book me. So I'd got a trade show down in, I don't know why I'm going like that, I don't even know if it's that direction. It was Las Vegas. And while I was there, he said, "Let's go to Denny and Lee's," which was a magic store in Las Vegas. I didn't know. I think I'd been to Vegas once before, but didn't know much about it at the time. So we go to this magic store, and the guy who was working there goes, Trevor was a regular in Vegas then doing these trade shows, and he said, "Hello, Trevor, blah, 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 chat. Oh, by the way, this is Keith Fields." And this is what he did. He went, "What, the Keith Fields?" And I'm going, "What do you mean the Keith Fields?" And he said, "The Insight guy." And I went, "Oh yeah, that Insight was a book test I put out a couple of years ago. Oh, well, I put it out maybe about so. Do you know Insight? Do you remember it?"
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And I didn't know, but this was, as far as Denny Haney was concerned, the best book test in the world. And he had been selling them because it was Murphy's had it, and he'd been recommending it to everybody. And the next thing he did was I've got to call Denny. He's not going to believe this. So 2 minutes now, I'd been in America maybe 2 months. I just lost all my cruise work. This was the only job I had in the diary. And I'm talking to Denny, and I'm going, I don't really know who this guy is. I know him vaguely by the name of the shop. And he says, so when are you going to come and do a lecture for me? And I go, well, I'm a bit busy, but we could probably fit something in about 6 weeks' time. Thinking to myself, I'm sure I can write a lecture in 6 weeks. And he said, okay, how does this date sound? And all of a sudden I had a lecture. And at that point, although I did have insight from years ago, I had no product, I had no nothing. I had some rough lecture notes from a lecture that I did in the UK about half a dozen times. There aren't many clubs in the UK. You can't make a living as a lecturer in the UK. It'd be nice if you could. I had a rough outline, put it together with my, Bill and banana routine that I used to do on the street. And I talked about the chop cut, which I used to do on the street. And I needed more stuff. And I remembered an idea I'd had. Actually, this is jumping into the human xylophone, which I know you wanted to talk about.
Well, it's one of my favorite routines that you've ever put out.
Yeah. If you want to know what the human xylophone is, it didn't exist at this time. It didn't actually exist. It was it's 8 wind chimes and 8 wooden spoons, and you get 8 kids out and they play a tune by, when you tap them on the head, they tap the bell. Look it up on YouTube. Just put in human xylophone, Keith Fields, and you'll see exactly what it is. In fact, go and do it now.
Yeah.
And we're back. Good. So I needed to make something. And I remembered this idea I had for a routine. Ages before, I had this idea for a routine. And the idea, I wanted bulb horns, like bicycle horns, pop, things. I wanted to get 8 kids up and play them because I thought it'd be a brilliant idea. Couldn't come up with it. And in the end, I came up with this guy of doing wind chimes. Never put it together, never thought about it. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe I could sell some of these. So I did made some up, did the lecture at Denny's. The first person who bought one was, oh crap, his name's gone out of my head, Bob Sheets. I said, I had 3. I made 3 of them, thinking I could sell them. I sold them for $100 each or something at the time, and thinking I'm never going to get $100 with it. But then, well, who cares? But I said, I've only got 3 of them with me. And Bob Sheets goes like this. And I said, looks like Mr. Sheets tells me I've only got 2 of them with me. And Bob's 2 friends both look at him and go, well, as he's buying it, we're buying it. And so they were sold before I finished it. And at that point, I thought I must be onto a winner here. And I can't begin to tell you how many I've sold. I didn't keep track. I wish I had. At one point, I actually went back, because the one thing I could do was I could work out how much of the pipe I bought. So, because I always bought them from the same place. So I went through all those receipts. And at one point, and this is quite a few years ago, I was up to about 3,000 of these things, which that's a hell of a lot for a children's family show trick. And it's still selling today. I got a call from someone today that wants to do it in their Edinburgh show. So, and he wants it quick. So can we get it over there for Edinburgh?
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it is crazy. And, again, these things happen,
So is this the point that you kind of started to do more lectures, more convention appearances?
Yeah.
Obviously, you have your magic shop online, Keith Fields Magic.
Yeah.
You've bought steadily tricks out over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So many amazing tricks as well. So many really, really good. Like one of my favorites is the marker pen that turns into the cane.
Okay. Yeah.
So many different, and obviously, my new favorite illusion wrapped up is so
perfectly wrapped.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean,
right. Call it what you like, as long as you buy it.
It's bought, it's done. But you've got such an eclectic range of magic. You normally see most people that have a little magic shop, and it's like this card trick, this card trick, this card trick. You're going from an illusion to a kid show trick to a book on how to work on stage. What I suppose, was that a conscious decision, and what made you decide to lean into this? Was it because this was work that was readily available that you could do?
I think it was work that I could get right now. And it wasn't, I mean, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love doing lectures, and I love teaching, and I love doing conventions, doing magic. I go to several magic conventions a year because I come home energized and excited by the ideas I've learned. I've just literally come back yesterday from the IBM convention in Pittsburgh, and unfortunately, I need to spend this week down in my basement making another perfectly wrapped, because someone bought one of those from me. So that's my job for this week. But all I want to do is sit down and dream about some of the ideas that I've come up with. And these are much more show ideas than trick ideas. And my approach to, I never think of, I never look at a trick. I look at a story, I look at an effect, I look at an idea, but it's never specifically a trick. The magic always comes much later. It's kind of, what emotion am I trying to create? And also in the show, I'm always looking for variety. So if I've got a build trick, that's the last thing I need. And, I've got two build tricks, and they're both pretty unique because they're both mine. Not necessarily the handling, there's so many different handlings, but I've got two routines which are very distinctly my routines. So I don't need another one. So I'm always looking for something which is totally different from everything else I'm doing in the show, to try and put in as much variety as possible. I wrote an article a while back, which I think was for Vanish magazine, and it was based on the concept of, where do you stand in relation to your props? I think I see too many magicians who are basically standing behind their props and they're doing a presentation of tricks.
Yeah.
That's what they're acting like. It is a presentation of tricks. Whereas I feel what I want to do is I want to get out in front of my props. And the fact is the tricks are there, and yes, they'll happen, but the show isn't about them. The show is about me. And then that progressed on to, a show which is about me and my wife, because now we do a double act, and that's all new and changing and different and exciting as well. So it's, I haven't sat still.
Did that happen when you came over to America? I mean,
oh, very much so. That was I suppose I was just getting to the point of establishing myself as a solo performer. I had a show down in a place called Gatlinburg in Tennessee, which is a little vacation place where there's lots of stuff. Have you heard of Pigeon Forge? No, it's a place in America. There's loads of shows and theaters, and people go. It's in the Smoky Mountains, and people go on vacation there. And there's a comedy barn and the Dixieland Theater and all this kind of thing. And someone got me a chance to do a show in this theater for the summer. So I was doing a one-man show. Really enjoyed it. Never done that before. Really seriously, I enjoyed not having people telling me what to do as well. Because when you're doing corporate shows, you're working for the man, you're working for someone else. Whereas when you're doing your own show, you're working for the people that bought a ticket, and that's much more street and much more real. And, and I always felt more comfortable in that situation. So I was doing that, ticking along all right. And about the same time, we brought two kids to America who were 12 and 14 when we brought them. And now they're adults. So they all left home and doing their own thing. But they'd left home. Kids were going. My daughter was just, I think, a year away from going to college or something. And we had a conversation. I had a conversation with Sarah, and it was just like, what are you going to do next? You were going to suddenly have an empty nest, and we went through various things, and it turned out that what she wanted to do was actually be part of the show. And that was absolutely the last thing I expected. But anyone who knows Sarah, and when we talk to our friends about it, and she's probably listening right now, actually, talk to her friends about it, some of them, the reaction was, it's about time. Why weren't you doing this years ago? And, it's just something which has grown and grown and grown and grown and grown. And, it's kind of like sometimes things just happen and you go, this is amazing. This is just, everything is right about it. So she's done, because she hasn't got a background 40 years on stage that I've got. So she put in a heck of a lot of work off her own bat, doing improv courses, and she joined Toastmasters, and she's been, you know, she's been quite done very well in Toastmaster competitions as well. She sort of she's won the area championship or something for the last 2 or 3 years running for Toastmasters. So, you know, but she's grown and grown and grown and grown and grown. And we ended up doing the Magic Castle together. I used to do the Magic Castle. It was great. I go there. You know, you walk out. Have you done the castle?
I haven't yet. No.
Oh, if you get the experience, grab it with both hands if you get the chance, because I walk out afterwards into the bar and everyone's going, after a great show at the Met, and everyone's going, oh, that was fantastic, that was wonderful, and you're like a little god, and it's a great feeling. And you're sitting at the bar and people are buying you drinks and thinking, I've got another show to do. This is going to be interesting. And so that was my experience of the Magic Castle. Start doing the double act, and then we'd worked out enough to do a double act in the parlour of the Magic Castle. We've got enough material together to do that. And the reaction was totally different after the show. After the show, walked out into the bar, and everyone's going, oh, Keith, that was a great show. And they turn to Sarah and go, you were fantastic. And I'm going, oh, what about? So it was an interesting ego adjustment, shall we say. But the businessman in me thought, oh, we're onto something here. And it's just been a great journey from then, creating new material, recreating my personality to a certain degree, because, you know, we had to work out who we were going to be on stage. We started off doing a school show together to see if it would work, because we decided very clearly that our relationship was the most important thing, and we weren't going to fall out over a magic act, you know. So we did this school show, did a tour of California with that, and that was a lot of fun and worked really well. And then started gradually moving into bits of the stage show, you know, initially doing some fill-in bits, and it's, you know, as we developed more and more routines and more material, we've got to the point now when we've just done a week working in Rich Block. Do you know Rich Block?
No.
Collector's Workshop. Do you remember Collector's Workshop? He was Collector's Workshop. If you were my age, you'd know him, because he used to come over and MC conventions in the UK all the time back in the day. Lovely man. He's got a 100-seat theatre down in Delaware, down there. So we were working with him for a week in that theatre, and we did 2 different 45-minute shows while we were down there. The first half we did one 45-minute show, and the second half of the week we did the other 45-minute show. Just establishing material, and of that all that material, there was only 10 minutes in each show which was any of my old solo material. All the rest of the material, everything else, is all double act stuff, and it's not a magician and assistant sort of setup. It is absolutely, you know, we're improvising like crazy, bouncing things off each other, loads of different stuff going on, and it's just phenomenal fun to be on stage with someone who you love, and someone who you love to be with.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. And off the back of that, you're telling me about how you've set up something in the Detroit area that's really putting magic on the map. Can we talk about that? Because you told me this story before we even started filming. And it's incredible what you've accomplished.
We wanted to do something ever since we did the show in Gatlinburg, which was kind of in our own little theatre space. We wanted to put on our own show somewhere, but we, you know, it was how we're going to do it, what we're going to do. And we spent probably a couple of years touring around as many of the magic venues that there are in America, because there's lots of them now. Dinner theaters, magic bars, some of them are just sort of classic theater shows. There's, you know, everything from Warren and Annabelle's in Hawaii, right, or Honolulu, whichever one of those islands, not sure which one. There's several down in California. There's Jay Alexander's got one in San Francisco. There's Smoke and Mirrors. There's Monday Night Magic, and, you know, Sean Farquhar's recently opened his Hidden Wonders. So these things are popping up all over the place, loads of them. And we thought, we'll tour as many of them as we possibly could. So we performed at lots of them to see how they did it. And they all had a slightly different style, a slightly different way of doing it. And I kind of worked out that basically the venue dictates the show. The venue dictates the show. It depends what facilities you've got in the venue, what you can actually do show-wise. And we took that concept on and we're talking about it, didn't know what to do. And at this time, this was rapidly approaching my 60th birthday, because Sarah organised what was a surprise 60th birthday at a restaurant just around the corner. We'd been there loads, hadn't thought about it, but they have an upstairs room. And because obviously we know quite a few magicians and a lot of other people, we had about 70 or 80 people up there, and there were lots of all the usual speeches, and it was a total surprise. I had zero idea. My son and grandchildren had flown in from the UK and all sorts. It was fantastic. But afterwards, we were talking to the manager of the show, and just, and he said that was the best party he's ever seen here, and everything else. All these interesting people, and we were talking and talking and talking. And Sarah turns around and goes, "Well, could we put on a public show here?" And he said, "Yeah, of course, it'd be great." And that's what happened.
Example: if you don't ask, you don't get, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we came up with the idea of we wanted to create something which was, because it was a dinner show, we wanted to have a meal there. So we decided we were going to have close-up magicians working through the meal, and we came up with the name, the Magic Soiree. And conveniently enough, the website, themagicsoiree.com, was available. I mean, how lucky is that to get a great name and have it available? So we set it up, and it's been through a number of different stages, but I think we've got it running as near perfectly. We've got the balance we wanted. We wanted it to be something which the local magicians could be proud of and a part of. And we wanted it to be something that we could use to promote ourselves as well and promote magic in this area. So the way we run it is the doors open at 6:30 and the audience all come in and sit down. And then Sarah, who acts as the MC of the whole event, she goes down the front and she does a sort of welcome stuff and all this, and tells them that they're going to be getting their food soon and not to worry. And she introduces the close-up magicians. Now, this is something which we fell into by accident, but boy, the difference is made, because most of the venues that do this, the close-up magicians just drift out at some point in the evening and the magic just sort of starts. It's not a big thing. But by introducing the close-up magic, it raised their status. So everyone knew who they were. So it was real easy.
Expecting them to go over to the table. Yeah.
People were going excited. And then we had a guy called BJ was over from Colon, visiting us as a close-up magician. He hadn't done before, it was his first time. So Sarah introduced him, and he came down the front and he started talking to Sarah. No one had ever done that before, at that point. It was just like, introduce your close-up magicians. Here they go, 1, 2, 3, let the magic begin. The close-up magicians go out. And he started, and I suddenly went, this is fantastic. It raised their status because they were allowed to talk. It raised the expectation level in the audience even more because they wanted to see him. So we immediately put this in the next show. And then a few weeks later, we put in a bit where Sarah goes to one of the close-up magicians, which table do you want to start at? And he sort of looks around and goes, well, I know, I'll start at the table that cheers the loudest. So now you get a cheering competition, and each of the close-up magicians is going out, and so they're all cheering and going crazy. And then she goes, let the magic begin, and they have close-up, and they have the buffet meal, and the lovely lady Sarah, who's just walked in. You've got to come and say hello, my love.
No, because I look like a dog's dinner.
No, she looks like a dog's dinner, apparently, which is kind of weird because we haven't even got a dog.
I can say hello.
As you can say hello.
I have been weeding.
You have been weeding. Just, it's just a podcast, don't we?
Oh, hello.
Oh,
How are you?
I'm very
Look how
good.
red I am.
Yes.
Okay, this is not a good look.
Not a good look. Go away. I'm saying nice things to you at the moment. So,
I just spoke to Christian.
did you? Yeah,
Christian
he
and Catalina.
tried to call me, but I was in the middle of this.
Yeah.
Come on. We're
Okay,
doing
sorry.
something important.
Yeah, really, boy. I don't think I'll just cook the dinner, all right?
Thank you.
You guys are amazing.
How can it not be perfect to be on stage with her? I mean, it's just
Show ever.
So we anyway get back to the one thing I was talking. The important thing I was talking about before I was rudely interrupted. At the end of after they've had dinner, everyone sees 3 close-up magicians, And then we do the cabaret show. And during the cabaret show, one of the close-up guys does 12 to 15 minutes in the stage show as well. And we designed this purposely because, you know, we want the local guys to have an opportunity to perform. A lot of them could do close-up. Not many of them had done any sort of parlory, stagey type of work. So we've been working with them as best we can. You know, some of them, after we do the shows, we film the shows for them, and we film their sort of 15-minute stage show. And some of them come round a few days later, and we go through the video and, you know, make suggestions on how it can be better for the next time. And, you know, to cut a long story short, we're now up to a point when we're running. We reopen in September because we closed for 2 months over the summer. And we'll be opening every Saturday and probably 2 Fridays a month. But as soon as we get into October and November, January at the latest, we're fairly confident that we'll be doing Friday, Saturday every week. And that's what we're aiming for.
Amazing.
But you can look at that. If you want to see a bit, sort of some clips and things like that, you can go to themagicsoiree.com and, you know, just see some pictures and what we're doing down there.
Amazing. Because you don't think of Detroit as a hub for magic.
You know, it might seem crazy, but I could talk about the history of magic in Michigan for probably half an hour off the top of my head. It is an incredibly big magic center. We've got, you've heard of Abbott's Magic, an Abbott's get together. That's about 2 hours from here in Michigan. So it's got all the history of the Blackstones. The Blackstone farm was over there. There's another place, Marshall has got the American history, the American Museum of Magic History, which is another sort of hour away from here. Some of the famous magicians that come from Michigan include Kevin James, the amazing Jonathan, Hobson, Franz Harari, Carol Fox, Keith Fields and Lady Sarah. I can't remember his name. So it's you know, it's actually a hive of magic, believe it or not. And I found a picture in the American Magic Museum. It was a photograph of the dinner of the Detroit Magic Club in 1939 or 1940. And there was this huge ballroom full of men and women all dressed up, like loads of, there must have been 100, 150 people in the shot or something like that. So Detroit had a huge magic club back then. I mean, I didn't point out that we were a bit busy, you know, fighting the Second World War at the time, but I didn't mention that. But our magic club we've got a magic club in Detroit, which again, it was going through a desperate time. It was really bad. A new guy by the name of Johnny New York has taken it over, and it's absolutely flying now. It's absolutely brilliant. Great. We get 50 guys every show. Don't move, Sarah. Can you do me a favor and bring the battery, because I'm actually the battery charger, because I'm exhausting the battery.
I'll just go now. What did the last wife die of?
She's not dead yet, darling.
Oh my God!
My battery's going low, and I better pop it on charge.
You said
I'm going for a Sean Farquhar here, I think, if I'm not careful. He did one that lasted 4.5 hours, apparently.
Why am I not surprised?
Thank you.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh my God.
Do you know how to do it, darling?
Yeah, there we go. There we go. And my screen is bright again. No,
this is literally the best interview ever.
I'm enjoying myself. I need a glass of wine. I'm going to be here for a while, darling.
I'm having a great time. Oh my gosh. And you said that a couple of your close-up guys have just won first and second place in the IBM convention close-up.
Yeah, we are blessed with some incredibly talented guys that have come, and women. Yeah, but I'm talking about Farron and Dragan at the moment. They are just incredible. They do some very advanced magic, and a lot of it's internet stuff, and they've learned on the internet. But Dragan is also incredibly creative. His whole act that he did in the close-up competition is literally everything from start to finish was stuff he made himself. absolutely everything. And yeah, Sarah just said, I was going to say that, my love. She said, and if you like, I can set you up with an interview with both of these guys.
I would love that. Let's do that. That sounds great.
So Farron is incredibly creative with his stuff, and Draken is incredibly creative, and Farron is, as well as being incredibly creative, is very good at coin magic. That's his thing. He loves coin magic. Draken's a bit more of a generalist, but does some very advanced card stuff, and he does some of the the card flourishing stuff, the fancy stuff, and all that. They are just amazing, the work they put in. We took them to the Winter Carnival competition in February, which is a competition in Pigeon Forge down in the south in Tennessee. And in that one, Draken came in second and Farron wasn't placed. And we came to this one. They'd done so much work. They virtually created new acts, and they just blew it out the water. The improvement was, how's this for a good trick?
Now that's perfect. Yeah. This is going to become a very interesting interview.
What's the time in England, my friend? Where are you at?
It's not late. It's 1:45.
There we go. That's nothing. That's all right. I didn't want to keep you up too long. It's 6:42 here and a balmy 80 degrees outside.
Well, look, here's what I wanted to ask you, which is...
You mean we got this far and you haven't asked it yet?
No, because it's kind of what I use to wrap things up, because what I'm really interested in is, what is there anything left on your magical bucket list that you want to hit? Because let me like reiterate what I mean here. If you took a snapshot of where you are right now and said to pretty much almost any magician, this is where you can be at the very end of your career, they'd be like, oh my gosh, that would just be the best thing ever. You're nowhere near the end of your career and you've achieved so much. You became an incredibly successful performer in the UK. Then you came over to Detroit, started with nothing and built it all up again. Now you've got this 2-person show with Sarah. You lecture literally all over the world. You have your creations, your tricks that you've created are performed by magicians and entertainers all over the world.
Yeah, Michael Hammer's currently closing his show in Vegas with My Illusion.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, there you go. I mean, what you've done so much, and now you've got the magic soiree that you're really building up and building up and building up. Is there anything left that you want to achieve, that you want to do, like, or is it just, hey, I'll go for it?
I think a couple of years ago, I actually got to a point of realizing that I'd had a very selfish career, really. I'd done everything for me. And I have, as I was saying earlier, I spent my life just pushing on doors. They happen to open, so I go through and see what happened. But I got to a point of wanting to give back and wanting to be involved or somehow, and I wanted to give back to magic. And I phoned up Ken Scott, who was the president of the IBM at the time. And I said, Ken, I just want to let you know, if you've got something that needs doing, at the convention, I'll work behind the registration desk. I'll stand on the door taking tickets. I don't care what you want me to do. But I would just like to be in a, I would like to feel I wasn't taking any more and I was giving back, basically what it was. And he came back to me a couple of weeks later and he asked me to send him a CV, which I thought was a bit weird. I've just volunteered to work on a registration. You need a CV for that. I haven't got much experience. That's all I could say about registration there. But I gave him a sort of 2-page potted career history. And then I get a phone call from him about 6 months later, and he says, "Oh, you're on the executive committee of the International Brotherhood of Magicians." And I went, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, we're on the international." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, they basically run it." So all of a sudden, I found myself for the first time in my life on a committee. I've never done anything like this before, but as ever, I'll go with it, see what happens. That was just over a year ago, actually. I was inducted onto the committee a year ago at the convention in 2022, and we just had the convention in 2023. And during that convention, I was the Toastmaster. I did everything from being Toastmaster for the banquet. Sarah and I did a show for the after banquet show, which meant literally we had to rush out of one room into the other room and start the show. We only had the length of time the audience had to move from one room to the next. It was crazy. And then, yeah, I emceed a couple of other shows. So I did everything from all that kind of stuff to moving chairs around and setting up chairs in the various different rooms. I was doing that. And then we organized another event, which was a new event, which we'd introduced to the convention, which was a first timers party. And we had a first timers party where if it was your first time at the IBM convention, we had a special party with foods and snacks and drinks and that kind of thing. And we brought a few of the performers in just to welcome them and share a tip about, well, it was all a bit tongue in cheek with our typical British humor. It was all about, can you remember your first time? That was yeah, I know, I'm building it up. See what I have to work with. She's saying, you've forgotten the best bit. I said, no, I haven't. I'm saving it till the end. It's called theatrical timing, my love. Anyway, so we went through, we had Oliver Tabor was over for it. So I couldn't resist getting him up because he is the current president of the biggest IBM ring in the world. I mean, we do cheat by having it for the country rather than for the city, because most of them are just for the city, but you know, go big or go home, that's what I say. And then for the finale, we had Lance Burton, and he told us the story of his first time and his first convention. And he also told us a fantastic story about the fact that he did the Pittsburgh IBM convention, I think it was 45 years ago or something. And he did the Pittsburgh competition and he won the gold medal, which is the sort of biggest award that the IBM give out. And as a result of that, the guy who owned the Magic Castle was in the audience, and he booked him to go and do the Magic Castle. And when he was in the Magic Castle, the guy who does that at the time did the Friday night, Johnny Carson was in the audience, and he got booked from that show to do the Johnny Carson show, and from the Johnny Carson show he got booked to do Vegas. So that all happened like very short space of time. So he credits the IBM competition for being the start of his career.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that's kind of one of the main things we're into now. And getting the guys involved in the close-up competition is part of that. We're going to be taking over the whole competition for the IBM. Sarah and I are going to be running it as from a couple of years' time. Wow. That's kind of hugely exciting as well. And yeah, it's great things to look forward to.
And did I hear that I think you mentioned earlier on, you're coming over to the convention in Eastbourne this year?
Yes, yeah. That was my first ever convention. I don't know. Were you around for the Cabbages shows?
A little bit, I think. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I did the Cabbages shows back there many years ago, but that was been my convention experience was the IBM in the UK until I moved to America. I didn't know there were any other conventions. And of course, now there's others in the UK and many across America. But it's always a pleasure because I've got really good friends. I mean, like Moira and Rena and the people that are back there. These have been friends for all my life that I made at the early days of the convention, and now they're running the convention. So I get frequent calls. If ever I'm in the country, they always say, "Do you happen to be in Eastbourne in September this year? Would you mind popping in?" So they're wonderful, wonderful people. They work very hard for the IBM. So yeah, we're over emceeing the gala show, which is the beginning of September. I think it is about the
7th to the 10th of September.
7th to the 10th of September. So yeah, we will be there having a lot of fun and really looking forward just to catching up with a whole load of old friends. I love conventions. I love the fact that, you know, I go to a convention and I come back energized with loads of things I want to work on, loads of ideas. And yeah, it just kickstarts everything. Yeah, go to a convention. Yeah, get out there and do it. It's important.
It's very true. It's very, very true. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that get into magic now that just do everything online. They've never gone to a magic society. They've never gone to a convention. They maybe started learning magic on YouTube.
Yeah.
bought magic online, and they've, you know, I met a magician the other day who's never met another magician, and I was working an event that they were working at, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, I've never worked with another magician before." So it's
that was Ferran, the guy who won the close-up competition. Although he was a brilliant coin worker, it's all been stuff he's sat at home. He's only really performed magic to a few friends and his family until, although he is incredibly advanced coin magic he's doing. It was coming here, we could get him out of his shell. He met more magicians, and he had a small magic club in where he used to live. Moves here, bigger magic club, and it's his life and soul, and working the magic soiree. He would work any day we give him, he will be there, and he will be brilliant. We got some videos of his the competitions that they did, so you can pick out a couple of bits of that maybe and interview them soon. They'd love it.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
And actually, before we wrap this up, I've not heard at any point you talk family shows, you talk kid shows, you've talked cabaret, you've talked illusion shows, you've talked two-person shows with Sarah. Never heard you mention the word close-up in the same sentence as Keith Fields in this entire interview.
Sorry, Mo. Sarah's saying rude things to me now over here, and let's get. I don't do close-up.
That's crazy. You must be one of the few people that doesn't. Most people just kind of fall into it. It's like that thing that you end up doing. Wow.
I remember back at the very beginning. I know we chatted a bit before we started recording this, but I did say that actually I'm not a natural performer. It's not something that and people kind of expect us to perform. And I don't want to end up having to do tricks for people all the time. And I feel uncomfortable. I feel really uncomfortable if I'm at a dinner party and someone says, do some tricks, and then I do some tricks, and then they're going to talk about the tricks for the next 20 minutes. And if you do a trick with a group of lay people and they talk about the tricks for the next 20 minutes, it's amazing how transparent those tricks begin to become. However good the tricks are, someone says something like, I think he just put the lemon under the cup when we weren't looking. And everyone else goes, ah. Now, sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're totally wrong. Around the table, and as the magician, I can't then turn around and go, no, you're wrong, because they'll have another guess and eventually they'll be right. And I find that a very uncomfortable situation that I've been in a lot of times. So I don't like performing in that situation. I can now I can do it without thinking about, but for most of my life, I haven't liked it. And I've just it's never been my thing. I don't like learning lots of card tricks. They don't interest me. And I've always thought to myself, I'd much rather, if there's a room full of 100 people and, they want someone to do close up, I just think, well, why can't you all come around me now, and I'll do the whole thing in half an hour, and you'll all see more magic. It'll be a better show. You'll be better entertained. And then I'll go. It'll be much easier than having to talk to all of you one at a time. Less time consuming and more fun. But I can do that. And I think the truth is, lots of close-up magicians, that's what they do. That's what they love. That's what their heart is. And that's great. That's great. It's not what I do. And it's not where my heart is. I'd much rather stand up in front of all of them. Then I don't really have to talk to them individually. I can talk to them as a group, which is something I'm much better at talking to a group than I am at talking to individuals. So
here's the thing, and I am going to wrap this up because I know you're busy, but
I'm not busy. I can talk to you forever. What you mean is you need to go to bed because it's gone midnight now.
Oh, no. I'll keep going forever. I have a lot of people ask me on this channel that they say, hey, I'm a close-up magician. I want to go and do cabaret. I want to perform on stage. I think it's most close-up magicians' goals are to perform on stage.
So why do they keep doing close-up magic then?
Well, so many people say to me, how do I transition to stage? Because it scares me to death. The thought of walking out on stage in front of 50, 100, 200 people compared to walking up to 4 people or on a table.
Mm.
just massively out their comfort zone. What
Yes.
advice would you give somebody who wants to move
Um,
on stage but doesn't know what to do?
the first thing they need to do is stop finding reasons not to do it. Because the idea of, you're not going to be a brilliant stage performer the first time you do a stage show. Although I wouldn't recommend going from close up to stage as one leap. I would think there is a middle ground. There is a parlor show area where you can virtually do close up material. But here is what I think is the real secret. You've got to start doing parlor material when you're in close up. You've got to develop material when you're in close up, which you can step back from the group, and rather than like doing 2 or 3 people standing up around you, if you're in a walk around, or doing it at a table to 3 or 4 people, you've got to think in your mind that you're presenting to more people than that. And if you're doing walk around, and this is what happens if I am doing close-up magic, I end up performing to everybody, because someone turns around and starts watching. And I've done this, I've done street shows, I've done trade shows, I've done all that kind of thing. So if someone turns around and they're not watching, I call them over. And all of a sudden, because of the old street entertainer, all of a sudden I've got more people, and now everyone's watching me, and I'm thinking I'm meant to be here for an hour. Which means I've got about 15 minutes of close-up material with me, and now I'm entertaining everyone in the room. But yeah, the secret is, I think one of the secrets is just do it. To go, design a set which you can actually do tricks which you could do in a parlor setting, but just perform them in a close-up setting, and then you're going to get comfortable with a type of material. So, because you can't take a lot of close-up material and do it in a parlor setting, so do it the other way around. Work out what parlor material you want to do and do that in the close-up setting. And then you will find your material. You'll have the material when you do parlor. You'll already have that material. It'll already be worked in, and it'll already be practiced. My guys at the Magic Soiree, that's one of the things I work with and talk to them about it, because they know they're all going to get a regular chance to go on stage and do a 12, 15 minute sort of stand-up parlor set. We have 64 seats in the venue, so it's a good size. We've got PA systems and microphones and lights and all that kind of stuff. But that's what I'm always telling them is think about routines which you can do in close-up, so you can get comfortable with the routine. Yeah. And then your problem should be, what am I going to have to miss out from my close-up set to do on stage? And I say, well, that's the time you go back to doing close-up, and then you just start the process over again. Yeah, it's kind of just do it. And you need to grab every opportunity. Going back when I first started, I did talent shows years ago. I don't know if they still happen in the UK, but pub talent shows were kind of a big thing in the 80s.
I did quite a popular thing now.
Yeah. I did loads of them, and I used to get, usually back in those days, I remember it was £25 prize for the rounds. And then you got through to the, some of them you went straight through to the final, or some of them had a semi-final, and the semi-final you won 50 quid, and maybe the final you might win 250 quid or something like that. Yeah. I don't hear my wife muttering in the back. I've been beaten by a singing dog.
Every good magic act needs to get beaten by a dog at one point or another.
Yeah, that's true. I was beaten by a family of Hawaiian dancers once, but more often than not, I was beaten by an 8-year-old girl singer. If those 3 things were missing, then I always won. And back in those days, 250. I worked out this way that I kept a count of how many talent shows I did, and I divided my talent show income by the number of shows I did, even when I lost and won nothing. And I worked out how much I got paid per talent show, and I kept a running average. Now, the crazy thing about this is I was probably averaging £100 a show or something like that. So the way it worked in my mind was every time I did a talent show, I may or may not win, but on average, I earned £100. So every extra show I did, I on average I made £100, and that keeps going. And I still use that sort of psychology with lectures. When I go out and do lectures for magic clubs, there might be very few people there, and you might make virtually nothing in sales, and then you go to the next club and there's loads of people there and you make a lot of money in sales. So what I always do is I always say, on average, I make X per lecture. And I always keep it like over the last couple of years. So every lecture, so I know when I'm going, I don't care I don't care if I don't sell anything. It doesn't matter to me, because I know the next lecture I'll probably sell a lot. And it just average it out. And as long as you're happy with the average, it means you can go to a weird club where there's 3 people there and you can have a really pleasant evening, and you don't worry, because I'm still making, you know, $1,000 on average from the lectures that I make, or whatever it happens to be. It's a great, I have loads of little philosophies on life, which we've developed over the years. And that's one of them, as a way of working about things. You know, I have my £100 rule. It doesn't work exactly, but loosely speaking, I work out how many hours it's going to take me to do the gig from when I get in the car to when I get back. And as long as I'm making over £100 an hour, because I think £100 an hour is kind of, that's not bad money, is it really? So if I'm making over £100 an hour, then I'm thinking I'm making more than your average guy who's doing an average job. So why shouldn't I do the gig? It could be fun, and it could lead to something better. You know, everything could lead to something better. So you just go in with the right attitude and just have fun.
And that's been your MO. Just wait for doors to open up and
pretty much. That's a various other sayings, like the answer is yes, what is the question? That's a golden one. That's a golden one. And the best one of all, actually, which probably drives me forward more than anything else, is what's the worst thing that can happen? Now, I'm a magician and a comedian. The worst thing that can happen is I don't do any magic, or the audience don't laugh.
Yeah.
And maybe I don't get paid. That's it. That's the worst thing that can happen on going and doing a show. And yeah, I won't enjoy the experience. You know, it won't be necessarily pleasant. But you know, if I was a brain surgeon and I was having a bad day, somehow that's a bit more significant, you know. So if we see ourselves in context, and you know, remember that our job basically is to give the audience sort of an emotional buzz. They want to see something, or they want to feel different to the way they felt when they sat down. And if you can actually do that, what we're actually doing is we're changing the chemistry in people's brains. We're taking them from one place and moving them to another emotional place. And that's it's an honor, and it's a responsibility. And we want people to feel better when they leave us than they felt when they came to us. We often say at the end of our show, if our job is easy, if we can put a smile on your faces and bring some laughter to your lips, then our job is done. Yeah. And you know, and it's just fantastic. You know, what could be better than what we do, really?
You get to, exactly, you know, it's the old expression, isn't it? If you love what you do, you're never going to work a day in your life.
Yeah, one of my other joking sayings is I retired at 25, because that's the last time I worked for someone else. You know, in many ways, yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, well, you know what this is like as a career. It is work, and at times it is hard work. And you know, it's life, but it's your responsibility. You know, you are responsible for your own luck. The harder you work, the more luck you have, the better the luck you have. I think it was Magic Johnson that was talking about basketball, and they said, you scored more baskets than anyone else in the world. And he went, yeah, but I've also missed more baskets than anyone else in the world, because I've had more shots than anyone else in the world. You know, so the more times you do something, the more chance of doing it really well, of getting it really good, of being better than everybody else, or being different to everybody else. And that's what it counts, you know.
That's very, very true. Wow. Keith, I could speak to you for hours. I really could.
Oh, anytime, you know, I'm here.
I think we need to do a part 2, a part 3, a part 4, a part 5.
Well, yeah, I should maybe bring my missus in next time, and she'll tell you her side of the story.
You know what? I would love that. I would love to do a follow-up interview with you and Sarah, because I have a feeling that she would provide some really interesting insights as well, right?
Yeah, her insights are probably different to mine. I mean, I do sometimes pinch myself and go, I am, you know, I said to my mum once, what did I do to get clever children? And she said, it misses a generation. And I suppose that's how I feel about my life. I just think, what did I do to deserve this? I don't know. You know, it's not all been good. Don't get me wrong. It hasn't been a wonderful glory. You know, we've had ups and downs, but you know, we can look back on a life and say we've achieved some things, we've done some things, we've got to travel around the world, we've got 3 fantastic children, 3 amazing granddaughters, a huge ginger cat. And
there's some bad bits. There are bad.
Yeah, I told him some of the bad bits. Don't worry. I was an honest man.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, you know, you're in a good place right now. And you wouldn't have got there without going through the bad and the good. You got to go.
Very true. Yeah, a friend of mine, one of my best friends back in the UK, Steve Mills. One of his sayings says, "If you're happy now, then you can't regret anything that's ever happened to you, because without that, you wouldn't be where you are now." And I think there's part of it that now is the only thing we really experience. You know, we don't experience the past. It's a memory and it affects us, but we don't experience it. We don't experience the future. We only experience now. So being happy now is key. That sounds a bit trite, but it's, you know,
no, it's
because happiness is a weird thing, but you know, but I suppose I don't think happiness is actually the right one. I think it's I think maybe content would be a better word than happy in that situation, because you know, you still need to have challenges. You still need without challenges, life is meaningless. We've got to have things that we're trying to achieve, things that we're trying to do, more things that you want to do. You know, I'm a long way from giving up.
Well, I can tell that. I can tell that. I mean, wow. So if people want to buy anything from your online shop, you do ship worldwide.
I do.
Your website is keithfieldsmagic.com.
Yeah.
And you click on shop and you're going to be able to see everything there.
Mm-hmm.
And
there are a couple of other websites as well. I mean, if they want to see more about our performance, I've also got keithfields.com is more about my sort of solo work, and there's some videos and stuff on there. We have another website, abritofmagic.net. That's one with a different ending for various odds and ends reasons. But abritofmagic.net is kind of our theatre show that Sarah and I do together. And then the Magic Soiree will tell you about the club. And I have to mention my wife, Sarah Harfield, Lady Sarah, as she's known in the show. She's also writes children's books. So you can see sarahharfield.com like that. So
do you? Wow.
This is all part of this. You know, when she became a performer, she started doing school shows as an author and going in, because in America there's a big school show market. And as an author, she goes to the school shows. She, you know, reads a book and talks to the kids about writing stories. She was very dyslexic as a child. The concept of being an author is just kind of built into the story, was how difficult that was. And yeah, she does her own 45-minute show in schools, talking about how to write books and how to come up using imagination and all that kind of thing. And yeah, it's fabulous, lots of fun.
That sounds great. Wow, you guys are just multi-talented. You've just got so much going on.
We're blessed to be able to do stuff that we enjoy, but we also make a point of enjoying what we do. So it's works both ways.
That's amazing. I definitely want to do a follow-up interview. I definitely want to get in, Sarah, and delve more deeply into this. But I mean, thank you so much, Keith, for jumping on, talking about your life, talking about your career, talking about everything so openly, and also sharing so much amazing advice. You know, anybody who's watching this, and I get a lot of views on these videos, I hope they realize that this has been a masterclass in how to get ahead in entertainment, because it is a difficult industry to get ahead in. You know, it can eat you up if you're not careful.
Yeah. The biggest secret, I think one of the biggest secrets I learned was from Paul Daniels. He said to me, we were chatting once, and he said, you have to do what other people won't do or what other people can't do. And that's a great way of being different. You know, if you put a bit more effort in. When I was going around the comedy clubs, I was what I used to refer to myself as a man with a bag act. I carried my bag on stage. I opened my bag. I did my show. My show went back in my bag, and I carried my bag off the stage. And it was kind of it worked. It worked at the time. It was probably the right thing to do. But I look back on it, and I actually think maybe now that was one of the worst decisions I ever made. Because nowadays I say, if it doesn't fit in my van, I will buy a bigger van. Mm-hmm. Because if it's worth doing, it's worth whatever effort it takes to do it. And whatever effort it takes will pay dividends because other people won't do it. So, find stuff that you think is worth doing and that you can get enough out of, and just go for it 100%.
And you've talked about, I very quickly, you talked about in the early days, you kind of just did the set act. Mm-hmm. But that you've talked about how in the last few years, you're constantly updating your material and you're constantly changing things around. Is that because of necessity? I.e., you've got this show that you're running, the Magic Soiree, you might have people coming back, you want to change it up? Or is that something that you've done for your own personal kind of...
We haven't really changed the bulk of the show since we started doing our show. We started off bringing different acts in, and we've had different formats we played with. But post-COVID, it's been our show, and we've been headlining all the time. The only major part that I changed, there was one routine, which was a solo routine, which I was probably doing more out of, vanity and hanging on to my, my old stuff. And it was a trick that I love doing. I really still enjoy doing. But I wanted the show to be 100% a double act. I didn't want it to be me doing a bit and then Sarah coming on and doing a bit with me, and then maybe her and I wanted as much both of us on stage at the same time as possible. And we've got that material now, so now we're towards that. And now the way my brain works, I'm always looking for a new closer. And what happens is I come up with a new closer, and the old closer gets knocked down into the middle of the show. And this is kind of really how my creative process is. I'm always looking for something to top the end of the show. Those shows that they have one bit on the end which is even better, and then you're surprised that there's an even better bit, and then an even better. And if you can get into that role, and I'm going, this is what I'm doing at the moment. What's even better than that? And then what's even better than that? And what's even better than that? And it's sort of, and sometimes better means bigger. Sometimes better means smaller. It means different things at different times, but it's that's the goal, is to a friend of mine, I remember a guy, Jeff Boys, comedian, great comedian. We were talking to him about an act, and he had one of the best closers at the time I've ever seen, and his act went along, but his closer went up there, and we were talking about it, and I said, all you need is a good closer. All you need is a good, because as long as the rest of your act is good enough, all you need is a good closer. And there's a lot of truth in that. If you've got to do an hour show, which is kind of what we normally do now, the bulk of the show needs to be good enough, and the end has to be brilliant, and you will storm everywhere you go. But that's not good enough. This is what Jeff said. He said he wants the whole show to be as good as the ending. Now, realistically, that doesn't work, because the show has to go like this. You can't take the audience up there and hold them up there forever. You've got to take them on a journey, and you also have to have a little bit of a quieter bit before the ending when you come really up, and then you need the extra ending, which gives you the surprise and hopefully the standing ovation at the end. Yeah. And having, when you've worked out that structure and you're taking the audience with you. But I love the concept of someone who's never happy, and what he wants is something that's better than the finale of his current show. That's the thing I'm always looking for.
Wow. And are you actively looking at a new closing routine at the moment? Because you told me one of the things that you're closing with, and I can't see many routines that would top that.
One of the things we close with is the perfectly wrapped. One of the other things, actually, I really love the show we're doing at the moment, because when we came on, I was tinkling on my ukulele, and there's something, the perfect show kind of starts where it ends. The perfect show ends where it starts. Got that the wrong way around. And our show now starts with me coming out, holding a ukulele, saying, you know, great to have you here. We're not here for a long time, but we are here for a good time. And as you know, during the next 7 hours, I'm going to be playing for you 300 years of ukulele music. And that's kind of virtually the opening lines of the show. And then Sarah comes on and says, what are you doing? And I go, I'm doing the ukulele show for the ladies and gentlemen. And then she tells me we're meant to do a magic show, and that's where the chaos begins. But during the show, I then produce magically a couple of ukuleles. And I go to start playing again, and she stops me, and I go, all I wanted to do is play a bit of ukulele for the ladies and gentlemen. She won't let me do it. All this. And then at the end of the show, it just happens that everyone walks off stage, and I'm left on stage, and there happens to be a ukulele in a stand just down there. And then I play the ukulele to close the show. So it's got that nice arc of completion. And I'm really enjoying that arc of completion in the show at the moment. But we have certain routines, which I also love doing, which don't work within that structure. You know, so I'm fighting to say I could do that routine in the show, but it necessitates not being able to use the ukulele. So it's, you know, it's trying to make everything work with everything else as well, and trying to create the best piece of theatre that we possibly can.
And it's difficult sometimes to drop material that you love.
Yeah.
It would be very difficult to do that. Like,
I find it difficult to drop a line sometimes. That was Ken Dodd's problem. He never dropped a line, which is why he used to do 4-hour shows in theatres, and half the audience would leave after 2 hours because they just laughed themselves silly. They had no energy left, and he'd be playing to a half-full theatre, but he'd still be going. Crazy man.
I interviewed a little while ago on here Alec Powell, who obviously supported at the Ken few shows, and also Danny Hunt I've interviewed, who has so, and they both talked about how the shows just went on forever and ever and ever and ever.
And Doddy insisted they stayed for a bow at the end. He was old school. He was old school. So you'd have someone that opened the second half of the show, and they'd have to wait around for 3 hours backstage to go on and take a bow before they could drive home. Oh, showbiz can be a harsh master.
It really can. It really can. So I mean, I've got plenty more to talk about, but I mean, I think we can leave it to part 2. But
save it for next time.
Are you going to be lecturing over in the UK anytime? Obviously, we've talked about how you're going to be at the convention. Would you be coming back to the UK and doing a lecture tour over here? I remember the last time I saw you was Tricks in the Sticks lecturing. That was a few years ago now, pre-COVID.
That was a few years ago. That was the last lecture I did in the UK. I suppose, we've often talked about this. Going back to the UK is very much for us a chance to visit family and catch up with old friends. And I haven't done so much lecturing, but I think I will definitely would like to, you know, to do a few. I did the Magic Circle once a while back, and I did a whole load of online stuff during the dark times. We put together a sort of a drop-in, a half-hour, 40-minute drop-in, and we visited. I think it was ended up being over 150 magic clubs around the world, you know, everywhere from Australia, New Zealand. We weren't charging for anything because I was figuring we were all in a pretty crap time, but we just wanted to do something to try and keep magic clubs together. Because magic clubs, I'm a great believer. So listen, guys, seriously, if you're listening to this, and this is not just because I'm on the IBM committee, I've always been a real believer that, you know, magic needs to be shared, and it needs to be done person to person, and you will learn so much. So find other magicians to hang out with, find other magicians to do what we do, which I never did back in the UK. We get half a dozen people sitting around the dining room table for 3 or 4 hours, and we just eat pizza, drink wine, and talk magic, and come up with ideas, and talk about shows and stuff. But have an evening doing that. Just get some friends together. You know, it's amazing what you can come up with, and how much more excited you can feel about magic. And if everyone says we are going to learn one new trick from a book, and we're going to show it that night, and then you get to the situation when you're giving feedback to each other, and you're going, oh, that bit was good, but you did this wrong, and you start learning from each other, and all of a sudden you're getting better. And you know, that's how it happens. You know,
I completely agree. 100%. Well, hopefully we'll see you back over in the UK at some point soon.
Well, yeah, you're not going to the IBM convention?
I am going to the IBM convention with Ryland. Yes, we're both
Oh,
going.
you are?
Yeah, we're both going to be there.
Oh, we'll see you there.
Perfect, because I've never met him.
That's my wife again.
I know someone now, babe.
Yeah. We'll have a friend when we get there.
We'll definitely hang out. Yeah, me and Ryland are going to be there. In fact, I just did an interview with Oliver about all the different things that are going on at the convention. He's got an incredible lineup, so it's going to be a really good one. So
no, we're really excited. We were in Eastbourne, I think. Was it 2 years ago, darling? I can't remember when we were last there, but it was so. I mean, it was just, there are so many old friends, and it really was. I got there, and it just felt like you were family. You know, that the nice family, the ones you like. It was just really nice. So I can't wait to get back again. Can't wait. September the 7th, I think we said it was.
September the 7th to September the 10th. Yeah.
We shall be in Eastbourne. Please come and see us there.
Absolutely. You and Sarah will both be there, and I'm sure everyone will come and see you. And I want everybody who's been watching this interview to leave a comment down below. Let Keith know what you thought. I thought it was amazing. Let me know down below if you'd like me to do another interview with Keith and Sarah. I think that would be the greatest interview of all time. And more importantly,
I don't know if you're ready for that.
I don't think I am. I'm going to have a few stiff drinks before I do that one. And don't forget to check out Keith's website. There's some amazing. Go and buy the human xylophone. Go and buy the triangle of terror. Go and buy everything. Just everything is amazing. And yeah, I'll be back with another video very, very soon. But Keith, thank you so much for jumping on the channel.
Thank you. It's been fun for me to reminisce.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Keith, I will see you again soon. If not before, see you in Eastbourne. Absolutely. Guys, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again soon.